Today, we're jumping into the incredible, decades-long story of how American women organized to demand their rights. We're talking about a fight that moved from behind closed doors right into the public square and changed the nation forever.
All right, so here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at how women created this powerful new public voice. Then, we'll dive into the clubs where this whole movement really got its start. After that, we'll see the many different ways women fought for reform, cover that final dramatic push for the vote, and finally, unpack the victory and what it all meant.
So, to really get a handle on the suffrage movement, you've got to appreciate its sheer scale. I mean, this was not some quiet, polite campaign fought in living rooms. Oh no, this was loud, it was public, and it was on the streets.
Just try to picture this. It's 1915, New York City, and 20,000 women are marching through the city. Not 100, not 1,000, 20,000, all demanding the right to vote. Talk about making a statement. That's a massive, you can't ignore us kind of public display. And you know, this was so much more than just a walk down the street. These women were throwing a direct challenge to the biggest social rules of their time. This whole idea that a woman's place was quietly at home. They were out there making a very loud, very public demand for real political power.
So you have to ask, right? A parade of 20,000 people doesn't just happen out of nowhere. A moment like that is built on something. It's built on decades of tireless, foundational work. A lot of it happening in places you might not even expect.
So where did the spark for all of this come from? Well, the seeds of this huge national movement were actually planted in all these small local organizations that eventually grew into these incredibly powerful networks.
Back in the late 19th century, women's clubs were popping up everywhere. A lot of them started out as places for, charity work or intellectual chats. But they changed. They evolved into these crucial hubs where women could organize, learn political skills, and start to look outside their own walls to fix the problems in their communities.
Now, this is where the story gets, it gets complicated, and frankly, pretty painful. The club movement was largely segregated. As racial prejudice grew, many of the big white women's organizations, like the General Federation of Women's Clubs, actually excluded their black sisters. So what happened? Black women created their own powerful, parallel organizations to fight for their rights.
And look at the mission of these black women's clubs. You had these absolute trailblazers like Mary Church Terrell and Josephine St. Pierre Ruffin leading the way. And for them, suffrage wasn't just some standalone issue. No way. It was all connected to fighting racial discrimination, to providing services their communities needed, and to building these vital networks for black empowerment across the entire country.
And this is what's so fascinating, right? There was no one-size-fits-all playbook for being an activist. The road to reform was paved by women using wildly different tactics, from, taking a hatchet to a bar, to using methodical social science. Speaking of different playbooks, get a load of this quote. This is how one of the most fearsome activists of the time, Carrie A. Nation, saw herself. She truly believed she was on a mission from God, and let's just say her approach was direct.
Yeah, you heard that right. Nation's signature move was something she called a hatchetation. She would literally march into a saloon, which she saw as the root of problems like poverty and domestic abuse, and she would physically smash the place to pieces with a hatchet. She got arrested, of course, a bunch of times, but her actions were national news.
Now, on the complete other end of the spectrum from Nation's hatchet, you had more mainstream organizations, like the Women's Christian Temperance Union. Under their leader, Frances Willard, they created a do-everything policy. They basically tackled any and every social issue they could, from prison reform to child labor laws, and of course, their big one, the prohibition of alcohol. And then there was this completely different angle, the super methodical, data-driven model of Jane Addams. She started Hull House in Chicago, where educated reformers actually lived in poor neighborhoods. They didn't just offer help, they collected hard data, statistics on poverty, on disease, and then they used that evidence to go to politicians and demand real, lasting legislative change. This was social reform as a science. And this quote, this one really gets to the heart of it. It's from Rose Schneiderman, a leader in the Women's Trade Union League. For working-class women, the vote wasn't just some abstract idea. It was a tool. It was a way to fight for a life with dignity, for bread, basic economic security, but also for roses, for a life with beauty and joy. Okay, so you've got all these different groups, right? The club women, the temperance crusaders, the settlement house workers, the labor activists, and as we get into the 20th century, all these different streams start flowing together, like rivers into one giant current,
all pushing toward the same ultimate goal, winning the vote for everyone nationwide.
So this final campaign was basically fought on two main fronts. In one corner, you had the big, established group, NASA, the National American Women's Suffrage Association. They were playing the long game, a traditional political strategy. But then, in the other corner, you had the newer, more radical National Woman's Party, led by the incredible Alice Paul. They were done waiting. They took to the streets with protests and marches, and they even started picketing the White House, a shocking tactic that got them arrested and thrown in jail.
But we have to be real here and talk about a really troubling part of this story. To try and win support, some white suffragists, and not just in the South, made this awful argument that giving educated white women the vote was a way to maintain white supremacy and cancel out the votes of black men. It's a complicated and frankly ugly part of the movement's history that we can't ignore.
But the momentum was just undeniable. I mean, look at how quickly things start happening in this final decade. You have these big victories out west, then the immense pressure from the White House protests. It all forces President Woodrow Wilson's hand, and in 1918 he finally declares his support, which really paves the way for the final victory.
And so, after more than 70 years of struggle, of lobbying, of marching, of sacrifice, the entire political landscape of the United States was about to be changed, fundamentally and forever.
And there it is, 1920. The 19th Amendment is finally ratified. Women's suffrage is the law of the land. It was this absolute landmark victory, a moment that really marks the full arrival of women in American public life. And you better believe women from every single walk of life mobilized to use that new right.
But here's the thing to remember. Winning the vote was a monumental, generation-defining achievement, no doubt about it. But it wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a whole new chapter. It was a powerful key, but it makes you wonder, what other doors did that key open? And which ones still needed to be kicked down?